beautiful people of Africa. Welcome to Global Insight. This day, we are going to dive into another very important topic, still looking at the situation in Kenya. The last time we were looking at the policies, especially the foreign policies of President William Ruto. But today we want to look at how the finance bill advocated by the president is leaving Kenya undivided. Today's topic will elucidate on President William Ruto's finance bill and its decisive impact on Kenya. The recent events surrounding the proposed tax hike have sparked unrest and calls for the president's resignation, marking a significant turning point in Kenya's political landscape. From internet data to diapers, the finance bill aimed to raise taxes on a range of daily items and services, which caused, widespread dissatisfaction among Kenyans already struggling with a high cost of living, according to report. The youth-led protest movement, organized through social media, ignited nationwide demonstrations and a clash with authorities, resulting in tragic deaths and escalating tension in Kenya. President Ruto's decision to decline signing the bill and calling for its withdrawal, however, reflects the power of public opinion and the need for dialogue with the aggrieved citizens. But the question is, did this decision by William Ruto to unsign or reject the signing of the finance bill leave Kenya undivided, given that even after the State of Nation address, there are still protests in some parts of the country? And that's why today we are asking if the proposed finance bill has left Kenya divided, and of course we saw some protesters shifting from the finance tax to asking that the president should resign. What are the implications of these latest or recent development on the political landscape of Kenya? And of course, how has this, brought about some discrepancies between the foreign policy rhetoric of President William Ruto and the domestic policies and governance? Today, in the course of the program Global Insight, we're going to throw more light into the stakes in Kenya, understanding the major narratives, and seeing if the decision by William Ruto verbally to reject signing the finance bill has left Kenya divided, or has it actually pacified the protesting youth across the East African nation. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned. This is Global Insight. Welcome back. We're going to unveil the panel at the moment. Of course, let's go first of all to Kenya, and of course, acknowledging Professor MACHARIA MUNENE, who is Professor of History and International Relations, Kenya. Hello to you, Professor. We appreciate you for gracing our platform this day.
My pleasure to be with you.
It's always a pleasure to having a constructive discussion pertaining events surrounding the African continent, and the East African nation of Kenya is on the table for discussion. All together, let's move to Algeria, being also joined by Professor LAEED ZAGHLAMI, Algiers University, Faculty of Information and Communication. Hello to you, sir, and welcome this day.
Thank you, Clara. Good afternoon to you and to your panel from the whole continent of Africa, as well from Ghana and from Kenya.
Indeed, just to note that other guests will be joining us subsequently, but before entering into understanding the real stakes in Kenya, let's have a recap of what happened, particularly from Thursday till date with Laurencia Room. Akia, just to let us know that FIDEL OWUSU from Ghana, international relations expert and security analyst, has just joined the conversation at this moment. Welcome to you, FIDEL. Your mic, please. We can't hear you. We have Professor David MONDA, international relations expert, public policy analyst, a Kenyan, joining us this day. Hello to you, Professor. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to having a fruitful discussion with you all. And of course, representing the youth in Kenya, we have FELIX ORWAKA, co-chair Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. Hello to you. Welcome to Global Insiders Day.
Hello, thank you so much.
I appreciate you all for accepting and honoring our invitation this day. Before we go into the analysis, let's invite Laurencia Lum with this report.
The Nairobi Central Business District CBD remained calm Thursday morning ahead of anticipated mass protest against the Finance Bill 2024. Despite this calm atmosphere, anti-riot police have been deployed in various strategic areas, with police roadblocks put up along all routes leading to the State House. There had been planned protests on Thursday, with some protesters vowing to occupy State House. This anticipated protest are coming despite President William Ruto's decision on Wednesday to withdraw the Finance Bill. According to the Kenya Medical Association, at least 23 people were killed nationwide and 30 were being treated for bullet wounds from deadly clashes on Tuesday that also saw Parliament being stormed briefly. Protest supporters were somehow divided on how Thursday's demonstrations should be carried out. While some were in support for demonstrations but opposed the course to invade State House as it could spur more violence and be used to justify a crackdown, others said they would not demonstrate as the Finance Bill had been scrapped. Those advocating for more protests have said only Ruto's resignation would satisfy them. Ruto is struggling with the most serious crisis of his 2 years in office, as the youth-led protest movement has grown rapidly from online condemnations of the tax hikes into mass rallies demanding a political overhaul. The president, in a speech on Wednesday, upheld his push to raise taxes on items such as bread, cooking oil and diapers, saying it was justified by the need to cut Kenya's high debt, which has made borrowing difficult and squeezed the currency. He, however, acknowledged that the public had overwhelmingly rejected the Finance Bill, noting that he would now start a dialogue with Kenyan youth and work on austerity measures, beginning with cuts to the budget of the presidency. In the meantime, there is still a great deal of skepticism about President Ruto's decision to withdraw the bill, going by responses from social media users. People have been pointing to the fact that if the president doesn't sign the bill into law and doesn't assent it, then it automatically becomes law within 3 weeks. The only solution for the bill to be completely cancelled is if Parliament retracted it. But Parliament has gone into recess until late July, when the 21-day limit would have passed. Social media users are saying they think this is just a distraction and the bill will still be automatically passed by that constitutional parliamentary process.
Thank you so much, Laurencia Lum. And of course, the last statement brings us to the controversy still lingering across Kenya, given that though the president has verbally said that he will not sign to law the bill, the parliament has to take a decision. And this is where the problematic lies. We're going to start off the conversation with you, Professor MACHARIA. Let's analyze the state of affairs in Kenya today, pertaining the discrepancies stemming from the president's verbal withdrawal of the finance bill and the role of the parliament in putting an end to this.
Thank you. The situation is very volatile at present, but the president eventually heeded some calls that the first thing he should do was to commit not to assent to the bill and to return it to the parliament with his memorandum. He promised to do that. I think he has done that. And since the Speaker of the House asserted or claimed that he had received that document, and then he said he was committing it to the relevant committee to do what is normal. So that part of it is in the process. Whether there are hiccups along the way is another matter that needs to be looked into. The movement, because it started as a movement, has had its own dynamic forces. And when you have social political movements, the participants are not homogeneous. Sometimes they have some differences. And you can see within the movements, there are debates as to which way to go. Since initially the demand was reject, and it appears they succeeded in getting the president to say it will not go, it will be rejected. But then that was not the end for some people. Some people wanted to go a little bit further and say, now we need reform in the government, if not an overhaul of the government. So these are dynamics of its own. And it looks as if when it started, it was clear movement, but then some infiltration may have come in from some other people with a different agenda. So exactly the agenda cannot be said to be one, because the participants are many and they have a dynamism of their own. So we are seeing some of that. But the president is in a corner and he is trying his best, the best way he knows how. He is head of civil service, has issued some circular asking different stakeholders to nominate participants to a dialogue that will be held much later, and all those kind of things. So there is an attempt to diffuse the movements, but it's too early to say whether it will succeed or not.
Indeed, it's too early to make a categorical conclusion pertaining the development in Kenya. Over to the United States, we're going to meet Professor MONDA. In line with what Professor MACHARIA just highlighted pertaining the development in Kenya that came as a result of the controversial finance bill. Professor MONDA, can we say today that President William Ruto actually, broke the social contract between Kenyans and himself? Have we already arrived at that point?
I think we're long past that point. And it's a very difficult position that the president finds himself. Just to go back a little bit to what Professor MACHARIA was saying, there's been a big debate currently in Kenya about the legality of the verbal statement of the president to withdraw the bill. There's some legal thinking that really says that Parliament passed a version of a bill. So even if the president rejects it, that has to be amended and then voted on, and the legal process then should continue from there in terms of the lawmaking process from Parliament. But to your earlier question, I think this is a huge problem, because I think the trust, that social contract, that unwritten social contract between those that govern and those that are governed has long been broken. And I think this is really manifest in the explosion of this sentiment from the youth. And I think these sentiments are really held more broadly by the public. I must also add that the challenge with the Ruto administration is twofold. On one hand, the United States and Western powers, the International Monetary Fund, they're really pushing this government to raise revenues in order to allow the government to borrow more. This is why we see this higher levels of taxation. The problem on the ground is that the citizens, number one, don't feel the higher taxation is necessary. Number two, that these higher taxes are actually benefiting them. And number three, to a level, the country's lost its sovereignty, its autonomy, because it seems economic policy is being run from Washington rather than from Nairobi. So all these things are really tied into one, which leads to this whole explosion or, that you see on the street. I think lastly, specifically in terms of that social contract, it's really going to take some time to mend this social contract. Because let's not forget that even in the process of these demonstrations, there's been a lot of extrajudicial killings by the police. We've had vigilante squads of police going into individuals' living rooms, summarily picking people up and having people disappear, torturing demonstrators, and even killing, in many cases, citizens using live bullets. So that social contract is not only long been broken by the administration, it will take a lot of time to renegotiate. But I think it also then exemplifies the distrust that the citizens have, not only for the sitting government, but also for the uselessness, the ineffectiveness of the opposition that are also very deeply engaged in this grand corruption.
A role to play to see that the country is healthy politically. Thank you, Professor Monda. You quite touched some very striking areas, which I would go straight away now to Algeria, directing this question to you, Professor LAEED. Last time when we were looking at the foreign policy adopted by President William Ruto, where we argued that William Ruto wanted to have a balanced foreign policy, there were some sort of instances where we're looking at how this will maybe have maybe come into contradiction with its domestic policies or domestic governance. With what is happening already in Kenya pertaining the finance bill, how can we maybe what can the political stakeholders, particularly President William Ruto, do to try to come to a compromise in compromising its foreign policies and domestic policies that will put the interest of Kenya first? We heard the professor highlighting very well that seemingly orders are coming from Washington to Kenya or to Nairobi before William Ruto is taking some very crucial decisions pertaining the nations.
Thank you, Clarice. Good afternoon to you again, to your panel. Very happy to be with you again. Without interfering within Kenyan internal affairs, in general, domestic policy should be, otherwise the foreign policy should reflect the domestic policy. On the other hand, in other way, first of all, President Ruto should keep stable and democratic the country, because what have been witnessing for the couple of years is as a Kenyan country is a stable and democratic one. And of course, they enjoy this reputation of having well experienced, of course, in foreign policy, but it should be reflected also in domestic policy. I'm very sorry to hear that the decision taken by Ruto was in response or from pressure from International Monetary Fund. And from Algerian point of view, we suffered the hell in 1985 and 1986 when we succumbed to the decision of IMF, because IMF, although they are, of course, they are helping economy worldwide, but their decision, their condition are always against the poor people. And I said from my own experience, from the experience of Algeria, we really suffered heavily and extensively the decision taken by IMF to impose on Algerian drastic measure to redress the economy. So in other words, President Ruto should not be dictated by IMF any measure. On the contrary, I said, although I feel very sorry for those who were killed, without any concrete reason, he should have privileged the dialogue with his people. They should, and now we talk about in Kenya as elsewhere in Africa, we have Z generation of internet, generation of social media. They are very aware of what is going on. The mobilization, although they are not on the ground, in the street, but they are very active on the website, on the social media, and mobilization. Before it went to the street, it was on the social media and all this internet. So in other words, they are very aware, and more than that, they have political consciousness. President Ruto should be aware of the reaction of young people who are badly in need for incentives, for jobs, for, of course, housing, education, and so forth. And to impose high taxes on their way of living, it's like you have to cope, to keep or to cut off all their hopes and dreams for the future. So what the president should now have to do now, first of all, he has to consider this bill. Of course, he revoked it, and he should withdraw it and think of other possibility, other measure, social measures that could be compromised between needs of the society, social and economic of the society, and of course, accuracy and efficiency of the economy. But we should always put in the first place the needs of the society before any other pressure coming, whether even from International Monetary Fund or other financial institution. I would have liked that President Ruto should resume very good relation with the African Bank. They are for development. They are doing a great job with their new president. So we should always consider the African solution before looking outside the continent.
It's about looking at ways that Africa can solve its problems without posing more problems, of course, internal problems. Let's get the viewpoint of a young Kenyan. It should be noted that the recent protests in Kenya have shown to what level the youths in Kenya are actually involved in the political life of their country, the high level of civility in Kenya. So to you, Felix ORWAKA, you as the co-chair of Kenya Coalition on Youth and Peace and Security, what is your own perspective pertaining the latest development? Do you think the president actually hit to the demands of Kenyans by verbally rejecting to put into law the finance bill?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. First and foremost, I think I would love to start by saying that before even speaking on whatever has happened by the rejection of the finance bill by the president, we had a lot of issues as young people that we wanted the president to address to us. One is that there's a lot of historical promises or political nature that has been happening in our country, and not only country, but I'll say in quite a number of parts of Africa. The political leaders have been promising young people great things that they're going to give them and deliver to them when they're not in power. But once they get into power, they forget the power of the young people who brought them there. And the reason why you have seen a lot of young people getting out to the street, leave alone even to the street, the online mobilization is due to the dissatisfaction of young people when it comes to the political engagement of the young people. One, The finance bill was going to kill the generation, according to us, young people, being that we are a country that has the highest number of unemployed, according to us. And you find that when taxation comes to the areas that young people think that they can grow into, then it becomes hard for us to see the future. Because if you look at, let me just give you an example. It is so much painful and shameful to see over hundreds of thousands of young people mobilizing themselves in the internet, then making it actual by coming to the ground. This shows that majority of the young people who are in the ground are unemployed. They don't have any source of income. So for me, I think that the rejection of finance bill indicates clearly that our country never did a clear public participation. When you have a clear public participation of young people, then that enables us as young people to speak our mind, to speak our art. So the young people feel so much betrayed by the political leaders whom they expected to stand with them. So when you check the whole move of young people saying that they're going to the parliament as a way to show that they are not satisfied by the finance bill, was the betrayal that they saw from the political leaders. Let me say the legislators in the parliament. So they expected the legislators to walk with them the journey, to feel their pain, to feel their dissatisfaction. But that one never happened. So I don't think if still again, the rejection of finance bill is the final move for us as young people. In peace building, we believe that when we don't focus on young people, then there's those who will focus on these young people. Whatever I'm speaking about is the issue of radicalization. The next move of our nation depends on how best the energy of young people currently is going to be harvested. I'm speaking as a young person who is outside, looking for opportunity, looking to be heard, looking for the best way that the government can just listen to the simple statements that young people want, until that our country, we were given the most beautiful manifestation. So one of the things which women are crying outside is an increase in taxation in pads. Remember that during their manifestation, they say that women will get free pads. So for us, we are trying to counter-check what we were promised and what is being delivered. They're trying to tell us that they're focusing on local production, local manufacturing. We have reality and we have fiction. As the state of our country, I think our president is not serving our interests. He's serving the interests of the global world. The IMF demand to the nation. They're not serving us, because if the president can listen to us, sometimes when he focuses in local production or manufacturing, he's supposed to know that what is our nature of consumption. If he say that he wants to focus on local production, do we have enough factories to help us to do that one? Or is just trying to tell us so that we can be happy that they're going to do local manufacturing of products? So I think, still again, we need an explanation from the government. And I'm so much in shame that our president stated that only 6 young people died. And I'm telling you the truth that we have over 200 young people who died in our country. And those who are local can tell you, there's a place known as Githurai 45. One night, 112 lives were lost. Calling young people criminal in a national television was one of the things that provoked young people. How can you call young people that who went out to tell you? Before even they went to the street, they started telling you in the online platform, listen to us, reject the finance bill. But when young people came out, because of whatever had happened, you are calling them that whatever they have done is a treason. You are telling them that they are not citizen, but they're criminal. So I think still again, we need a lot to be answered to us as young people so that we can work with our country because we love our country.
Absolutely,
that's why we are out there to support it and also talk about the issues.
It's about coming to a compromise and seeing what Kenyans need. When the president, William Ruto was vying for the presidency, he actually garnered the support of the masses, and he was somehow seen as a political liberator from some of the problems Kenyans were facing before the last elections. But then this is also today with Kenya being a hotbed, seeing the dying of particularly young people in the East African nation. This brings us to the question of understanding, political intelligence that will preserve the peace and sovereignty of a nation. With you, Fidel, last time you were trying to analyze what William Ruto is doing with what Kwame Nkrumah did some years ago, all in the quest to defend the country's sovereignty and to see how we can revamp economies. So the question is, the finance bill was signed or maybe brought to the fore by President William Ruto, citing some of the benefits it will bring to the country. But now we see that the bill was affecting directly the population that we can consider to be vulnerable. In your own perspective, what do you think should have been the best, policies or ways for which William Ruto could adopt to be able to raise the revenue without having a direct and negative impact on the susceptible population in Kenya?
Thank you very much for this opportunity once again. Firstly, I would like to say that African leaders must become youth sensitive in the implementation of policies that they would like to push in good faith. Now, no leader would like to be unpopular. That is something that we should take. No leader would like to be unpopular. I mean, ordinarily, no leader would like to be unpopular. So whenever a leader is taking a decision, mostly they think that it is in the best interest of the country. But sometimes it is the considerations that precede the implementation of such or initiation of such policies that becomes problematic. Now, one thing that African leaders should note is that in most African countries, we have over 70% of the population being youth in most African countries. Now, this is being expressed in different ways. In Senegal, it has translated into voting for the youngest person currently on the continent as president, Diomaye Faye in Senegal. In Zambia, we saw the youth coming out to vote for a president who was an underdog before the elections. So the youth really use social media and things like that. In South Africa, it is the youth that has really changed the political landscape of South Africa. That for the first time, ANC had to form a coalition with a party they would have thought that they would ever be in a unity government or a coalition government with. That is the power of the youth. So that is very important. That said, we must look at Kenya objectively. This is a country with a debt of about over $80 billion. Half of that is external debt. Now, if you have such debt, it is obviously not sustainable vis-a-vis the size of the Kenyan economy. Now, with this problem, you need some solution. You need some policy. You need some austerity measure in order for you to survive. Now, if you look at this, we talk of IMF never, ever come to you until you go to them. That is one thing about IMF that we are supposed to get to them. They will never come to you and tell you what to do until you go to subscribe that, well, from where I have reached, my books are not balancing, and therefore I subscribe to a policy, IMF policy or intervention, because that was what it was formed to do. Already in previous discussions, I have said that the IMF, at the time the IMF was created, many African countries were not independent. They were still under colonialism. So IMF was originally not created for Africa. But eventually, we became independent states and therefore had to join the IMF anyways, because that is the global financial regime, Bretton Woods institutions, as part of the UN system post Second World War. As we've been part, Ghana, for instance, is now undergoing the 17th IMF program, very ridiculous. And that is not good. It means that some decisions were taken by the same politicians that were not good for the country, but they went ahead to do it. Because mostly, when you run into such debt, you obviously went into the market to borrow unsustainably, and that is why you run into such debt. The monies you took, you did not do sustainable investment that could pay for itself and perhaps correct things. You perhaps engage in consumption, massive consumption, or unsustainable consumption. For instance, if you took loans and then you bought cars for your convoy as a president, it's definitely going to be a debt on the country. If you took loans and it led to increment in allowances, certain allowances and salaries of politicians, that is not sustainable. But if you took loans and you built infrastructure that would pay for itself, for instance, building roads and tolling the road so that users of the road will pay road tolls for it to pay for itself, then you are doing investment. So going forward, these are some of the things that need to be considered. Because mostly we blame outside invisible hands in most of our problems as Africans. And it's about time we get more responsible. We took more responsible decisions domestically in order to avoid the budget overruns, the budget deficit that we run, so that these monies do not go into investing into the youth. It goes into, unnecessary expenditure. And that has been the story across the continent. However, now we have the problem. How do you resolve it? Before you come with a bill, there is a need to involve all stakeholders thoroughly, not artificially. It should be thorough. You engage the youth. There are youth leaders from all angles, from CSOs, from education schools, from different sectors of the Kenyan society. You bring them all around and you take them seriously. You never have to feel that, well, I'm the president and I think that this is good, so since it is good, that is what it must be. No, it doesn't work like that. I remember in the 80s in Ghana, we had a military regime, the Provisional National Defense Council, led by former President Rawlings. What he did was, before these Bretton Woods institutions came in, he went with the finance minister to the various sectors of the Ghanaian economy. Personally, he went with the finance minister. And fortunately for him, the finance minister was multilingual. He could speak most of the languages in Ghana. So they went to the military and spoke to them. They went to the schools to speak to the students. They went, and then in his presence, the president was there himself, the head of state was there, to answer questions that this is what we need. Nationalization of companies, state corporations is not sustainable. We need diversification. Some state institutions must be privatized in order to get some revenue, because overstaffing, corruption, and mismanagement have run these institutions down, and they were no more sustainable. That went, and that transition was smooth. For the first time in the late 80s, Ghana paid off $500 million of its loan. It was the biggest chunk the country had ever paid until that time. And in fact, it was very successful. So Ghana transited to democracy, and ever since then, there's been positive growth until recently we have to go to IMF again. So this is very important that you involve, when the problem is at hand, explain to the people. Don't assume, because as president, you are briefed economically and security-wise. Don't assume that you know everything. Let the people also understand. Let them understand that this is the real situation, because Felix must grow up in a system that is economically healthy. So if you spoke to him and told him, look, we have to have some compromise on these taxes. Some taxes must be paid. Then you let him know that you are securing his future. But in doing so, you must substantiate it by austerity measures on yourself as a government. You don't engage in unnecessary expenditure. And it is with this that sometimes your foreign policy will make sense when you are being hosted in the White House and other things. That is when the Kenyans are going to see that to be making sense. But until that, they may feel that you are only looking for outside glory, but domestically, you are not committed to their well-being. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Of course, that was actually Fidel. And we continue with you, Professor MACHARIA. After listening to what you have said pertaining the state of affairs in Kenya, we begin to look at how we can bring about political intelligence that will help solving the domestic problems of the country, like Kenya. Fidel highlighted the fact that countries do go to the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund, especially when they are in dire need. At this particular juncture, I remember in one of your interventions in a local TV in Kenya, you highlighted the fact that maybe some decisions are being taken by Washington or the foreign powers pertaining the states in Kenya, and that's why decisions which President William Ruto is taking are seemingly not corresponding to the demands or the need of Kenyans at the particular moment. So what does, the rejection of the finance bill signify now for the President Ruto's administration and Kenya's economic future, given that the move by him to try to see how the country can resolve its debts and even raise some revenues internally became so. So what does this signify, and what other parameters can be used to solve the economic problems facing the East African nation?
Thank you. President Ruto needs to go back to the drawing board. And going back to the drawing board would mean maybe having a new team of advisors, people who can tell him the truth. And there's nothing that has happened that was not foretold. People knew it. But he has had a problem listening to the ordinary people, to Kenyans. He does listen to those World Bank and IMF advisors because they are said to be located in the various offices, critical offices of state, like the Treasury, where they give advice and such places. So it's an issue of attitude. I think he and his team, what essentially the hustler grandees, and hustler grandees are the people who are running the show, and they are very extravagant. They don't pay attention to what people are saying. And because they do not pay attention to what people are saying, even when things are going wrong and they are told things are going wrong, they tended to ignore. There's nothing that's happening now that is new. And since they ignored the grievances of the people, it came to a boiling point. And this boiling point was represented by the finance bill, which was very insensitive to the plight of the people. Because when questions were raised, some of its crafters were very crass in their statements. Like the one who said that putting taxes on bread was to help people reduce obesity. So when you have that kind of thing, it's an insult to intelligence. You have other people who are feeling their weight because they just happen to be in those positions. So the insensitivity of the people in government is part of the reason we have this challenge at present. So for President Ruto, he needs, first of all, to go back to the drawing board in his own mind and the people he surrounds himself with. Then he should stop listening to the World Bank and the IMF too much. And not just the World Bank and the IMF. He should stop listening to those foreign advisors, whether they are based in Washington or some other place like Joe Biden apparently one of his advisors, and Meg Whitman, and listen more to Kenyans and not to those people. Now, this thing about the debt has to be paid, yeah, you borrow, you pay, but Kenyans did not borrow. It's a few people who borrowed and they misuse the money to put in the, and that's one of the things people are asking, why should we pay for somebody else's misdeeds? And in fact, some of that money probably never left the US or wherever it supposedly came from, because it was diverted to do other things. And since people know this, they are very angry. So don't tell them that we have to pay debt on that we don't understand. Now, in terms of borrowing, that's another matter. Yes, you can do some borrowing and pay, but as long as you use that money for development, to grow the economy. Right now, the economy is on the downward slide because there's no production. We are not producing. We are just consuming and importing things. And that way, even the tax base gets reduced. Recently, we heard that some of the foreign investors, instead of putting in their money or their capital or starting factories, they are withdrawing from Kenya and going to other countries. That in itself is poverty creation instead of poverty reduction. And it's happening partly because they feel they are threatened by high taxes that make no sense. Taxes don't build countries. Instead, they make them poorer. And there have been revolutions and other uprisings based on taxes alone. So it is a mental thing, a political economic challenge, a policy-making challenge that President Ruto needs to look at. And that's why it's an orientation thing. He has very poor regard for history and other critical thinking disciplines. So he ends up getting mesmerized by some things. So I think it's a wake-up call for him and the country to pay more attention to what people are saying instead of assuming that he knows everything and therefore he can do anything he wants because he's the one, only to turn around and pay attention to what foreigners are telling him. And then he seems to do it.
Indeed, and that's where it becomes very problematic. Foreign policies contradicting domestic policies and the burden on the susceptible Kenyans. This is the result of what we are seeing in Kenya today. But then there's always a way forward. Coming back to you, Professor MONDA, last week there was a planned protest by the diaspora, Kenyan diaspora, in denial or showing, rejection to the finance bill. But after the president addressed the nation and withdrew this finance bill, the protest was actually called off. Now, let's look at, Professor MACHARIA just highlighted that it is imperative for President William Ruto to go back to the drawing board to try to, review some of the major points at stake, especially those which actually come already undermining the security of the states. If we have listened keenly to all the analysis brought forth by you all, we'll discover that there are areas of corruption, mismanagement, and even debt burdens which have plagued the countries for years since Kenya gained independence. So the question is, with the present dispensations in the country, and how can the government address the deep-rooted issues of corruption, mismanagement, and even debt burdens that will salvage the country today and tomorrow?
I think what you raised is a very good point. And just you mentioned a little earlier about the diaspora demonstration.
Yeah.
I just want to highlight that there's one in New York today, which is still going on. It's been called for today afternoon, New York time. And there's another one for Washington, D.C. by Kenyans outside the Kenyan embassy which has been called for next week. So the diasporans are actually very engaged. I think they've raised around 24 million shillings already to support Kenyans that were short, families that were bereaved. So diaspora is still very, very engaged. Because you have to remember, a lot of people, diasporans, myself included, were forced out of Kenya precisely because of some of these repressive measures of government. So after a lot of people finished school in the West, conditions in Kenya didn't make it very fruitful for diasporans to go back and to contribute to their countries. So you find faculty like myself having to teach abroad for many, many years. So I think these are some of the contradictions that we have in terms of our continent going forward and how we think of how we engage the diaspora. To answer your question, I think I'd answer it in three broad ways in terms of how do we think about moving forward. One is the diplomatic element. Second one is the economic element. And the third one is the normative element in terms of governance. In terms of the diplomatic framing of this challenge, I think Kenya has historically in its foreign policy, I know you spoke about this in your program last session, where Kenya has had these contradictions in terms of its Pan-African rhetoric, wanting to appear Pan-African, wanting to appear to placate and address the interests of its population. But in terms of its foreign policy is aligned with the West and with neo-colonial interests that are not always in concert with the interests of the countries themselves, meaning Kenya, but also with the continent more broadly in terms of broader African and Pan-Africanist interests. So from a diplomatic front, I think that is something the Kenyan policymakers really need to rethink on the diplomatic front. When Kenya becomes a non-NATO ally of the United States, what are the broader implications of that to the continent and this broader goal of pushing back against American hegemony on the continent and its unilateral interventionism in Africa, but also in other parts of the world. I think that's the diplomatic front. Kenya really needs to rethink that. But also, more importantly, in diplomatic terms, there really needs to be a reconsideration of how the domestic policy interacts with the foreign policy and how the foreign policy interacts with the domestic policy. There seems to be a mismatch in the context of the Ruto administration, where foreign powers on his recent trips to the US, to the EU, they seem to praise the Ruto administration, but the praise in terms of his foreign policy is actually very repressive to domestic interests. So there's a huge mismatch there. So there's that angle of the diplomatic, I think, that needs to be addressed. The second angle is the economic front. If you really analyze that Kenya's debt portfolio, a large section of this debt is Chinese debt. And herein we have the problem, because a lot of this debt that you pick from the Chinese, it's short-term debt, which means the interest rates will be higher, but it's also very opaque debt. So a lot of these debt agreements that the Chinese signed with the Kenyan government and with many governments across Africa, they're very opaque. There's no citizen participation. To date, we still don't know the contract agreements between the Chinese government and the Kenyan government, for example, to build the standard gauge railway from Mombasa to Nairobi. That has always been a big secret. So I say that to say that then there really needs to be a rethink in terms of how much debt you're going to get from these foreign countries. And number two, how open will the leaders, back to your social contract, leaders need to be open and transparent when they are negotiating these debt agreements, because it cannot be that foreign debt is subsidizing domestic corruption. So again, there's that intersection between the economic and the diplomatic in terms of how we think about debt and some of these very secretive debt agreements. That will be something Kenya will need to renegotiate, because a lot of its debt portfolio is held up in Chinese debt. A lot of that debt is short-term debt with high interest rates, which are pegged to hard currencies, in this case, the US dollar. And that translates to economic pain for Kenyans on the ground, because when you have higher inflation, when you have a weakening Kenya shilling, that basically means that Kenyans have to pay more in terms of debt repayment because the currency is getting weaker, but the payments still have to be made in US dollars. So that's the second angle. I think the third angle of how I'd address this question of what do we do from here is the normative angle. And that means we really need to rethink our values, our national values as a country, as Kenyans. So to what extent will corruption become normalized? And I think that has been a big problem in Kenya, and it's something that the youth are really pushing back on. So to give you a very specific example, young people are now going online. They're looking at the suits and the shoes of some of these cabinet secretaries, which like in Ghana would be ministers or in other Commonwealth countries, right? And they're really tying a minister's income, what they earn, with their vehicles, with their assets, their houses, their multiple houses, and their conspicuous consumption. And there really seems to be a huge mismatch between some of these individuals, some of whom were TV analysts just a few years ago, you know, working at the university or regular Kenyans, and within 4 or 5 years of coming to government, they are buying themselves helicopters and they have lavish homes in very exclusive neighborhoods. So I think the youth are really using social media. They're using the digital framework to really hold these individuals accountable. And not only just to name and shame them, but also to put pressure on them to say, this extra house you have, this extra 3 or 4 extra vehicles you have, this is really our tax money. I think that is a very important element in terms of citizen engagement. How do we change these normative values so that governance and public service is not seen as an avenue for self-aggrandizement? That when you get into politics, you're going in to serve. It's a noble and high calling. It's not an opportunity to steal, because you can make as many laws as you want, but at a certain point, individuals have to have some ethical basis, some ethos about norms that are broadly societally accepted. So I think I'll conclude in terms of those three main points. The diplomatic angles really need to be addressed. How does Kenyan domestic policy interact with foreign policy to create conditions that advance Kenyan interests and African continental interests? How do you push back against unilateral, major power hegemony, whether it's American, Chinese, Russian, Turkish, or any other power? Yeah. Second element would be the economic angle. How do we rethink how we borrow? And do we always need to borrow? Might cutting down on corruption and more efficient, smarter use of the resources we have be the way to go? Mm-hmm. But thirdly, also to prosecute the people who've stolen money and to bring that money back. And then finally, this third angle of the normative values. We really need to rethink as Kenyans, as Africans, how we need to stop normalizing corruption. There's no reason why a president has to have a convoy of 50 vehicles and 2 helicopters and an army of security people, all funded by the taxpayer. We really need to rethink these normative values where the citizens do not reward politicians for abuse of the public trust and the social contract.
Thank you so much, Professor MONDA. To Algeria again, Professor LAEED, I would love that you comment to what FIDEL also said earlier on pertaining the controversy, you know, about African countries going to the IMF and the World Bank and also maybe borrowing from China. And so how we look at also the fact that we still have the United States or the US dollar as the reserve currency is actually putting a lot of burden local economies like we are seeing in Kenya right away. And when we are faced with such a problem, we look at ways that we can practically solve these, the underlying causes of the problem, so that in the nearest future, the leaders in the future will not have to bear the heavy burden. So, in your own perspective, Professor LAEED, how can we make these debts more clear rather than opaque, as has been, the president of the African Development Bank decried this some months ago, and we're seeing it recurring today, and being one of the reasons why Kenya has found itself in this political turmoil at the moment? Hello, Professor LAEED.
Yes, Clarisse, you are quite right, as well as FIDEL. Yeah, you are quite right, because as FIDEL already said, the whole world has, there was the creation of course, IMF and World Bank, and what we call the Brentwood system. Mm-hmm. And I think now, after 60 years or so of implementation of this banking system, has reached its end of, because all countries that went through this program have been facing uprising, social uprising, injustice, and so forth. I give you another example. I talked to you already about Algeria in 1985, when we went to IMF for support, and unfortunately we have riots and civil uprising and civil protests and so forth. And since then, we decided not to ask any support from IMF. I mean, Algeria, I would say, is the only, maybe one of the only country in the world that has no debt at all. So we are a country with self-sufficient when it comes to finances. So what I want to say, to our friends and decision makers in Africa, please explore the possibility of financial potential that exists within the continent. And I mentioned the African, of course, Bank for Development. This is one of the promising institutions that really can help Africa. Now, when it comes to IMF, from their practice, I give you an example. Tunisia, which is not far away from Algeria in our east border, they asked for $1.5 billion. And they want to help of measure, while Ukraine get about 40 or 50 billion of dollars without any constraint. What is the justice? So let's make it clear to all people in Africa, please, you have to bear in mind that IMF and World Bank are in the hands of the people who have not only the economic power, the financial power, but the political power. Those countries, those holders of IMF decision, they impose on the whole world. That's why now we have so many opportunities with the emergence of BRIC system, with the emergence of other bodies against the monopoly of as well as World Bank. And also we are witnessing the process of de-dollarization. The dollar has not to be the only monopoly money in the world. So we should look for other possibility, and that's why we have now should think about more opportunity, more avenue for more to have investment. This is one side of the coin. Of course, it's easy to blame the foreigners, but within ourselves we have to admit. And of course, I know quite a little bit about Kenya, which went through revolution and protest against British colonialism. And Kenyan people are known for their protest. They won't accept any injustice. That's why I saw now this, on the street, the young generation, Z generation, went to the street because they don't want to be ill-treated or to be hijacked their future. So what I want to say, I think I'm quite amazed. Kenya has the potential, the economic potential, the social potential to be a great, as I said last week, to be a regional power. I don't understand what went wrong. What went wrong? Understand. I can give you some example, and we have seen some acts of corruption, especially this case of fertilizers, what we seen about weeks ago, as well as we need more democracy, more accountability, more efficiency of good governance. I'm just asking why didn't the parliament should ask the government to come and ask for accountability. So here we should, one way or the other, use and implement all the institutions within the continent. We have the parliament, we have the justice, we have the government, we have the authority, we have the civil society. We should run our country in very democratic and friendly way. Otherwise, we will never succeed. I'm amazed that I have time as President Ruto praising the role of G20 and G7. I'm sorry to say G20 and G7 are countries who hold the whole power, the economic and financial power. And if you do not go along with their policy, they will impose on you their dictate. That's why we cannot praise this country, this body. G20 and G7 are just looking for their own interests, and they are imposing their own, I would say, political and financial worldwide.
Okay, thank you, Professor LAEED. If we're here, we're looking at how some external factors contributed to the dying economy of Kenya, and how the leadership of William Ruto is actually faced with revamping the economy. What are the perfect ways that can be taken, steps to be taken to bring the Kenya out of the state of affairs now that we are reporting the demise of the Kenyan vibrant youth. And talking about the vibrant youth of Kenya, I'll come back to you, OWUSU. Being a youth representative, you know, they always say that it is good to call for, you know, reforms, to reivindicate and to make your voices heard. Now, to see that some youths in Kenya became violent, how is this further undermining, you know, the security of the state and also the preservation of the infrastructure in the states, who again will bear the consequences of such acts? We know it's not justifiable.
Thanks so much for your question.
The police should, you know, open
allow
tear
me
gas.
begin by saying this.
Yes.
The current situation is not caused by young people directly. There was a trigger that made young people to engage into violence angle. And what I know about the history of our country, and there's different people who engage themselves to counter-attack the current narrative. It was very evident that we found there was quite a number of groups which were against what young people were trying to speak about. So for me, what I think as a young person is that we do acknowledge that there's a level that young people engaged in violence, but still again, it is according to the intelligence which is going around, there was a different group which was mobilized differently to counter-attack the current narrative. So one thing which I'm saying is that the face of the young people is clear. Being one, a lot of young people are outside there to look on the positive part. the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security is embedded in a foreign policy, which is the United Nations Security 2250. And one thing which I know about it is that when young people do not understand our policy, then it becomes hard even for us to get their voices clearly. So I want to give an example. Currently, the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security is working with young people at the grassroots level to make them understand the agenda of youth, peace, and security. The UN mandate is to give the member state, which is the government, to have a national action plan on agenda. So Kenya was supposed to have a national action plan on youth, peace, and security. But we as young people, we went diplomatically. We talked to the Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and explained to them that having a national action plan on youth, peace, and security will not be the end goal if the young people have not understood what does this policy means to their daily life. So we wanted the policy to engage each and every young person, and also that so that young people can own it. So that is the place that our government never did to us. I know that there's a lot of foreign policy that is that our government have adopted, but I'm only questioning, why can the government, or why can the president and his team tell the international policy makers that even though you have a policy that you want to sell to us, even though you have something you want us to work with you, kindly listen to us. We know our means. We know the struggle of our people. We know what we want to see with our generation to come. So the current situation that is happening was triggered with different things. You have said that you have seen young people getting violence, and as well as also trying maybe to steal or to interfere with the infrastructures. I want to tell you, we have painful moments that abductions had happened. And in one way or the other, the government took the position, or took the angle of abducting young, vibrant people who were speaking to the street with the current issue. So for me, I will still stand with the young people, that young people are not violence. Young people are creative. Young people are innovative. If the government could have just listened to the young people before even going to the street, because we had came out and trying to share out. What a number of the political class people, they think and they assume that the young people are not aware of the policy. I will tell you, there's quite a number of creative young people who got outside to teach their young people about the policy. I want to tell you that the work that the civil society has done to ensure that young people become peaceful, this is in the history. For all protests that has been happening, I can say that this is one of the most peaceful protests that has ever happened in our country, until young people were attacked by the police officers. If the government is open for dialogue, I'm telling you, there's no any young person who wants to die. I'm telling you, there's no any young person who wants to destroy their amenities. We love our country. I will tell you the truth. This is why young people are outside. They were outside to tell the government that, do you know what? We are not afraid of paying taxes, but be accountable. You are telling us that you are paying a debt which was squandered, which was divided among leaders in their offices, that now you're telling us that we are supposed to pay. Why can't you bring the leaders who squandered the amount into record? Why can't they pay their own money, even if it will take their own properties, even if it will take them to be arrested so that that man can come back? We need to do it. You are not supposed to leave Africa to the forensic nature of growth. We are not supposed to be led with what we do not know. Let's live within our means. And I'm very happy that at least the speakers of today's conversation, they are speaking the truth. We are not against the government. We are against corruption. We are against having over expenditure. We are against lack of transparency. Those are the issues. Don't tell us that young people we are able to be peaceful. I'm telling you one thing. We usually say, if diplomacy fails, then what do apply? Force applies. Young people are very diplomatic. We went with peace. We went with love. We went to speak our emotion. We went to speak the failures. We went out for that one. But what happened? They never received us diplomatically. They applied force on us.
Okay.
So don't make young people to look bad, yet you're the person who was pushing young people on wall. Listen to us. We want a conversation. We don't want conflict. We don't want war. Why do you bring KDF to fight us? Those people are our machineries to protect our country, but not to fight internally. Why can't we just have a nation which is good?
Indeed, thank you so much, OWUSU, for defending the plight of the young people, which is very intelligent to be aware of the political life of your country and engage in some major decisions that would determine the future of the nations. Now, to you again, Fidel OWUSU, we are at the bone of contention, you know, from the protest against the finance bill. We saw the call for President William Ruto to resign. Do you think of that resignation of the current or incumbent William Ruto will solve the underlying problem that Kenya has at the moment? Hello.
Yeah,
Fidel.
thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Last February, I was in Kenya. I spent some time, roughly 4 to 5 days. But I went there as a Ghanaian who was going for a conference where I spoke on security issues across Africa. During my stay, I had found some Ghanaian restaurants known as Golden Stool in Trademark Hotel, and I really enjoyed the place. Now, as a foreigner who had enough, some money on me to spend to buy some food, and I had my organization sponsor my accommodation and everything, I saw Kenya in a way that the ordinary Kenyan would not see. And perhaps I could not also see it the way they saw it. I mean, I'm not a Kenyan. I was more privileged to have been sponsored for that trip. And that is kind of conundrum or a paradox for a stranger, that when you're a stranger and you get somewhere, you always feel that the place is better than where you are coming from, and that sometimes you are in a hurry to praise the leaders for a good job done. But when you go to the grounds, you realize that things may be different from your perceptions or what you perceive. I had spoken with some foreigners, Europeans and Americans, who were also in the program, and they were also in high hopes for Kenya, and they believed that Kenya was on the right path. So these are some of the issues. At the same time, I was rather more pessimistic about my country, Ghana. The current IMF subscription and the program that we are undertaking is not helping and the youth. And I was telling the Europeans, and they also believe that Ghana was one of the best countries in Africa. So this is always the kind of thing that we face as Africans, that to the outside, especially when the country is democratic, Westerners often mistaken a democracy or a country, an African country that is trying to be democratic, as a safe haven for some youth or some living. But it's not always the case. In Ghana, for instance, there is this massive corruption and other things that often Westerners and foreigners in general overlook. They say, well, Ghana is doing well, it's one of the best and all that. But as we youth in Ghana have issues with corruption. That said, let's go back to the situation in Nairobi, especially where the parliament was invaded by youth and set on fire. I think that that was an unnecessary excess. It was unnecessary. And the reason is this. You know, in every revolution, just like we found in the French Revolution of 1789 and other revolutions, we have ideological spectrum, the ideological spectrum running through the people. We have people who are radicals, we have conservatives, we have liberals, we have all kinds of people mixed up and with different persuasions. In fact, among the youth over there were people who were strong members of the opposition party. They have a different aspiration. They would wish that their candidate was there, apart from the general hardship that the taxes would bring on them. There were other persuasions, and which Felix will attest to. In fact, I don't think that Felix participated in the invasion or the setting up of fire of the parliamentary. I don't think so. I don't think so. And he has his reason for not doing that, that he feels that that would be unnecessary. He feels that as youth, definitely the money in the national coffers would have been used to renovate the same project. That comes to bite him again. So there is always this excesses that needs to be controlled. And that is the main reason why when William Ruto came out to condemn and to call it a treasonable event, I knew that he was not just wanting to escalate the situation, but he wanted to separate what was legitimate from what was illegitimate. And then he went on to withdraw the bill. Then I realized that that is the right way to go. Because then you don't mix all the peaceful youth up. And I tell you, you don't need violence to effect change. Your voice was clear and your aspirations were made clear to the political class. Without the invasion of the parliament, you would still have gotten what you wanted. And so I think that going forward, the youth must moderate their actions. The reason is this: Kenya is one of the few countries in Africa that has not experienced military rule. Some time back, there were some attempts to take over government militarily, but it didn't work. In West Africa and other places, we have the military taking over. We saw the military taking over in Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea, and other places. When they took over, everyone was saying were singing praises. Currently, some youth are running away from Guinea and these countries because of the heavy-handedness of the military. You always need some civilians you can speak to. Then again, the shooting of protesters was also an excess on the part of the security. If you do that, then there's no difference between you and the military regime that doesn't want to listen to the civilians. So then that on both sides were excesses that going forward needs to be moderated in order to, at least we want everyone living. The better life that the Kenyans want, they want it for the living and not for the dead. And so there is no need to escalate the situation such that by the time the solution comes, you might have lost so many lives in the 21st century that I think is unnecessary. Now, the call for his resignation. In a parliamentary system, if Kenya was practicing a parliamentary system like what we have in the UK, or let's say even something close to the South African system, perhaps you would have part of the coalition pulling out for the government to fail and the prime minister would automatically resign. Kenya is practicing a presidential system, a majoritarian presidential system. In that case, resignation is very difficult, or forcing the person to step down is quite difficult, because in 4 years or in a few, he won power in 2022. In a short while, there'll be another election. The youth will have the right to use their thumb or whatever means to either maintain him or retain him or get him out. And with that, I think that is not necessary, that perhaps he should step down to trigger a constitutional crisis, because after all, if he steps down, you are going to have his deputy taking over. That deputy is part of the government. And I think that no matter how you see him to be maybe ideologically different, he is still part of the government. And so the debt of Kenya will not go away. The fact that Kenya is not in a good place economically will not go away overnight. But I think that as a leader who has admitted that his bill was too much and that he has listened to the voice of the youth, should be allowed to make amends. And if going forward, things do not change, the youth would always have that kind of privilege or opportunity to get him out or his government out. Then we come to his foreign policy. which as
Rounding
an
off,
international
you
relations
should be rounding off,
expert.
Fidel. Please, we don't have much time. You should be rounding off already.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Okay, please. I think another Kenyan just joining us now, wanting to share his own perspective on the development in the country. Richard, if you can hear us, you're an international relations expert, and we want to understand your own perspective pertaining the resignation of the president and how this can even go to solve the problems faced by Kenya. Richard?
Thank you very much for inviting me anyway. I'm not a Kenyan anyway. I'm Nigerian who lives in Kenya. I've gone very fond of the country. And just to add my own point of view, if you know Kenyans very well, like if you've lived with them, you realize that they're peaceful people. I mean, what's happened in the past 1 week was something that many people did not actually Kenyans being peaceful themselves, for them to actually come out of the street and do that, tell you that there's a big disconnect between the government and the youth. What I can actually take out of this is every youth have every right to protest, okay? If something wrong in the country, you believe that your voices are not being heard, or there are cases of massive corruption out there, the right of everybody to actually protest. The youths coming out of protest was actually a very good thing. And how the protest was handled by it was totally wrong. There are calls for some people actually on the government to actually investigate why there were a lot of people that died in that incident. That happened on its own is a clear disgrace and a shame. We already calls already in social media prior to that already. There were people clamoring, talking about this finance bill, talking about it and giving their own opinion about it. What I believe the government should have done is listen to the cries of the people. I believe the president has a media team that actually looks at the concerns of the people. What they could have done is to listen to the cries of the people, because there were people talking about this already, even before they came to the street. That protest could have actually been avoided. Only the president listening. Because what is going on in Kenya now, I see a situation whereby countries are so many countries in Africa are actually watching what. And even in Nigeria, there were people making comments about the similar should happen over there, because for Kenyans to come out this way, it was actually surprising to me. There will be a time where there will be a massive revolution in Africa, because what is happening here in Kenya is also similar to what is happening in so many countries. Even when the government do not listen to the cries of the people, funds have been stolen, and there is massive poverty going on around. So Kenyans on their part made their voices known. I believe the president should have avoided that protest by drawing out that bill. Now, what this has actually caused now is an eye-opener. I believe now that the president out of TV to actually reject the bill. I believe now so many things are going to change, because there's some Kenyans that are also calling for him to actually, which I don't know will not happen anyway, because in Africa, very unheard of for a president to actually step down. But what I believe he should do going forward is maybe try to create, let's say, a very direct relationship with the youth of the country. People are not happy at all. You to bring up that tax bill, and then you have to rob people by coming out on TV to say that, what is going on with the treason? That really angered a lot of people. I think the president of the nation, he has done his part already by coming out on TV to say what he wants. About trying to reject the bill. I don't even know if the president has the power to do that. I mean, I was told that he might not even have the power to do that at all. That it's because of the fact that the parliament has to sit sometime in July, might not have the power to do that. So him trying to reject the bill what's the way going forward? Kenyans want him to resign. People are clamoring and asking that, the MPs are earning too much money. Spending on governance in Kenya is actually very high. These are what the youth want to see. I believe that this time around, the president should put his eye very clear what is going on social media, because that Gen Z tag started on social media. And if you want to start a revolution or anything, it all begins on social media. So his advisors or his media team should actually advise him properly on what to do, focus on the issues that concerns the youth. Because every day the population of the youth is growing. People are getting discontent. I mean, watching your MPs spend a lot of money or, earn so much salaries, and then you have people who are struggling to earn or, who cannot even earn a good living. Watching that is something that many people are not really happy about. So going forward, the president needs to create what I call strong relationship. Presidency and the youth. Not a relationship whereby he just, sits, listen, and does nothing. But he has to act now because 2027 is coming around. And if he really wants to win the heart of Kenya, because if you want my opinion, if he should resign, we both know that will not happen. So what he can do now is create a relationship whereby you have to hear what the youth are saying. Because remember when he was coming to power in 2022, slogan, the Kenya Kwanzaa slogan, his slogan was for hustlers. Everybody in Kenya is a hustler. We're all trying to hustle. That slogan, where has it gone? Why has it not focused on the people? That's what people are saying now. Cost of governance is expensive. Things are not going on around. The relationship between the presidency and the people needs to be very strong now. And the government needs to take it seriously. If not, something is really, really going to go wrong in this country. And for us to try to avoid that protest that happened again where people died massively, is something that the government can do right now. Try and engage the youth. Put your focus on the youth, not on your MPs, not on the people that actually brought you to power, no, on the youth. This thing happens again next time. Time ticking bomb. And this is also a lesson to Africa. Everywhere in Africa, eat into what Kenyans have done. Somehow I believe that Kenyans have shown Africans the way now how to do it. Have a protest, even though we both know that unfortunately what transpired last week may have been hijacked by some people. But more Kenyans came and they did it peacefully. But going forward, the president should do better. Engage with them. You have media, you have your media team, you have your handlers. Listen to what people say. People are getting very, very angry. Every day they are growing.
Thank you so much. We are almost concluding, and we come to you for the concluding statement. Professor MACHARIA, just 2 minutes. How might the political dynamics surrounding the finance bill issue influence upcoming elections in Kenya, and somehow the broader trajectory of democratic governance in the country and the East African region? Just 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, well, what is happening in Kenya is very exciting and encouraging in the sense that it shows people can act, they can take power, and the importance of education. One of the problems with the finance bill was that it appeared to be looking the education. The people who are demonstrating, the young, these are people who went to school at the beginning of the 21st century when the President Kibaki said, watoto wasome. So they went to school almost free. And they learned a lot of things. So the value of good education has been brought forward in this thing. Now, as political dynamics, we know that a lot of MPs who voted for the bill are already in trouble with their people. And some of them have been visited and they are apologizing. In fact, a lot of MPs are apologizing for the way they voted, which shows that things are not very nice, the direction in the future. The youth have said they are going to vote. They usually don't vote. And they even don't register. So we hope that this time they will register in big numbers, and then they will exercise that right to vote when the time comes. And the parliament will be a totally different parliament, not the one that we have. Whether the president will be the same or not is another matter. But it will be affected. All those things will be affected by what has gone on. We have more enlightened people, more aware, and therefore more discerning and questioning a lot of things. And that's what the country needs. A lot of people who can raise questions if things are going wrong. So this is a learning experience for the whole country, not to keep quiet, to raise questions if things are going wrong, and seek answers. So going forward is that when the elections come, right now we have a serious problem that we don't have an election commission, which is a terrible mistake. So which needs to be fixed in order to prepare for possible elections, should there be one. A lot of people are going to lose their seats when the election comes, whenever that is. That is clear from the present and the way things are going. People are not happy, but it's an exciting time, a very hopeful time that things will continue being better instead of being worse, despite the challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor MACHARIA. To you, Professor MONDA, do you think that the Parliament will be convening in the days or weeks ahead, maybe the days ahead, to try to, relook this finance bill, given that the Parliament has a major role to play in such a way that it doesn't become law? 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, I think at this point, the Parliament is very much emasculated by the executive. So the way the Parliament voted for the finance bill was in lockstep with what the president wanted. So the executive has emasculated a lot of legislators. They're not acting independently. And I therefore see any vote coming from the Parliament will again reflect what the president had said. So, like I mentioned before, there's still a lot of court challenges about the legality of this bill, how it's going to go forward, and whether the parliamentarians can actually do what they're saying they're going to do. But I don't see them going against what the president has said. But I also think they are very terrified by the people, the reaction of the public. I guess then in conclusion, very briefly, I would say it's very important now that this Gen Z, the youth who are on the streets, starts to really articulate very clear, 3 or 4 very clear points of what they want done going forward. A lot of these social movements are leaderless, but that's a strength because the government can't arrest the leaders. But it's also a weakness because you have, as Professor MACHARIA was saying, you have such a heterogeneity of so many different interests. So I really think they need to come together with the stakeholders and really identify 3 or 4 core areas that they need to work on and establish coalitions very similar to what happened in 2002 to remove the dictatorship of Daniel Arap Moi. And then moving forward, really start to articulate at the grassroots how they will elect at the local, county, and national level a new breed of leadership. And I think that will radically change the parliament. It will hold the parliament accountable to the people. It will make President Ruto a one-term president. And this is something that can happen in spite of the negativity we have on the continent of our capacity to remove some of these authoritarians. But I think thirdly will be the critical role for the judiciary. The courts really need to stand in between the people and the tyranny of the government and ensure that the rule of law is upheld.
The need for the rule of law to prevail. Professor LAEED, with you concluding 2 minutes, let's look at how, how the rejection of the finance bill may impact Kenya's economic stability and international standing.
I think we have to draw some conclusion from what happened in Kenya. and particularly with this protest, which it's pity that happened and we reached to the bullet and dead and so forth. It's pity, of course, commiseration to all people who were killed. And President Ruto should learn from what happened. I think time has come that it's time that we have to mend the scars. There are scars in the country. He should give his hand for forgiveness, for tolerance, for dialogue with the youth people. And we should also, this is very key issue, not only in Kenya, but in the whole continent, we should empower youth involvement in the political process. In other words, we should give a chance to youth people to get involved in politics, in every decision-making process, and so forth. That's more important. More importantly, I would say also, we should, I think, start to revisit the whole institution, whether it's the parliament or what's the other institution, if there is time that we should ask for a snap election and then build a new political class in the whole country, whether at local or regional or national level. Because the problem is that that is happening not only in Kenya, but also in many countries of Africa. We should get, as I said, the involvement, not only the youth, but also the civil society. Civil society should be considered, should be listened to in order to avoid all this kind of situation. That is most important. Of course, we have all countries in Africa. It's good senior for the government in Africa. They should not rely on international foreign institutions, IMF and so forth, because they are here not only for getting for their own interests, and therefore we should rely on our potential by introducing more openness, more transparency, more accountability and efficiency in our way of running the country. Thank you very much.
So, LAEED, briefly with you, OWUSU, what is your concluding statement pertaining the behavior, of course, of young people in the days ahead while waiting for the final decisions that can come from the highest authority? 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so thanks so much. So I think I'll just speak given a minute.
Yeah.
There's one thing is that I believe in young people, that this message is to the young people that let's go back, reorganize, let's redefine our purpose, let's build a clear path that the government will want to listen to us. Let's give them issues, but not just assumption. Let's create a move that focuses on African development, but not African division. We have the power, we have the move. So if we want to talk with our leaders again, let's focus on picking votes and voting accurately. We know the reason why we are crying today. Majority of young people who voted, sometimes it happened that they voted because of political manipulation. We have known the method that they used to manipulate us. Let's not go that way. And my last statement is on the issue of our government. Our government, listen to young people. Maybe today you are in power, next time you won't be in power. If you don't create that platform that your young person can be raised on, then you'll be the person who is going to fail yourself. You have your Gen Z at home. Just know that we are also somebody's Gen Z. Love us, build us, create opportunity for us, and don't steal our money. We don't want corruption. Let's focus in ending unnecessary expenditure in our country and build Africa, build Kenya. We want to grow and fight poverty as a main enemy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Solidarity to everyone.
Indeed, Africa is blessed and shouldn't be suffering from unemployment and poverty. Of course, with you, FIDEL, also, let's look at how the rejection of this bill can, affect foreign direct investment, attracting foreign direct investment and maintaining fiscal sustainability in Kenya.
I think that some form of measures would have to be put in place in order to reverse the bad economic situation. But I mean, consultation, and I side fully with Felix on his last submission. I mean, that is what the youth need. Now, to something else like the foreign policy that I always talk about as a foreign policy person, I would say that regardless of what is happening in Kenya, President Ruto's moves in the Horn of Africa towards peace should be supported. His efforts between Somalia and his effort to de-escalate the situation between Somalia and Ethiopia should be encouraged. His effort to de-escalate the situation between the RSF and the SAF in Sudan should be encouraged. His effort to see peace in Eastern DRC should be encouraged. And his very unprecedented move to actually make Kenya an open place for all Africans to move in or out and travel freely should be encouraged. Because often when such unfortunate policies come up, we tend to overlook the successes or some of the good measures that the leader has put in place. We must see the good ones and encourage and advise him on the bad ones that could actually dent his image and worry the youth of the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fidel also for the input, and we're concluding. Of course, Richard is no longer there with us. I think we have come to the end of the program Global Insight. I want to take this opportunity, gentlemen, to appreciate your analysis and constructive approach towards the happenings in Kenya. Of course, we're charting a way forward towards looking for a practical, constructive solution to the problems facing the African continent. And today, Kenya, in the days ahead, we are hoping that the leadership, political leadership, will try to have some sort of political intelligence that will not anger vulnerable Kenyans, but of course will bring them into seeing reasons as to why some decisions are being taken, and also see how, you know, politicians can also, you know, be very instrumental in foregoing some of the privileges enjoyed by civil servants to be able to stem the problems affecting the entire continent and the country particularly. Thank you so much for your great insight. And it is on this note, ladies and gentlemen, that we draw the curtains into today's edition of Global Insight. But don't go away. Keep watching for You Media Africa, for news is always on the move. Bye-bye.